Hello and welcome. Live from New Delhi, you're watching DD India Live, India's voice to the world. I'm Gautam Roy, and coming up in the next 30 minutes, 2 people pulled out so far as rescuers search for survivors after a container ship rams the Key Bridge in Baltimore, Maryland. Authorities term it as a mass casualty incident. Governor declares a state of emergency. Julian Assange gets a breather from being extradited to the US. The London High Court gives American prosecutors time to give assurances on his fate. Next hearing is on the 20th of May. And India supports the Philippines in upholding its national sovereignty, says External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Shankar, amid the Southeast Asian nation's maritime dispute with China in the South China Sea. Well, first up, a major 2.57-kilometer long bridge collapsed in the U.S. port of Baltimore in the early hours of Tuesday after being struck by a container ship. Rescuers started looking for people who plunged into the Patapsco River. According to Baltimore City Fire Department, as many as 20 people fell into the river along with numerous vehicles. Fire Department spokesperson termed it as a mass casualty, multi-agency event and said that the rescue operation could extend for many days. A live video posted on YouTube showed the ship hitting the bridge, after which major portions of the bridge collapsed into the river. Maryland's Transportation Authority said all lanes were closed in both directions and traffic is being diverted. Chief of Baltimore City Fire Department in fact said that they have rescued 2 people so far and still searching for people underwater and on the ship.
Arrived on scene and reported a complete collapse of the Key Bridge. We were also given information at that time that there were likely multiple people on the bridge at the time of the collapse, and that as a result, multiple people were in the water. We were able to remove 2 people from the water. We have multiple resources. We are still very much in an active search and rescue posture at this point, and we will continue to be for some time. We have a large area that we have to search. This includes on the surface of the water, subsurface, as well as on the deck of the ship itself.
As it's a developing situation, we're getting DD India Simon Marks to join us live on the story from Washington, D.C. Good afternoon to good evening to you, Simon, rather. It's been several hours since the container ship rammed the bridge. Are efforts still on to pull out the people who fell into the river? Do we know anything about the status of the people on the ship itself?
Well, there is a search and rescue operation underway now, Gautam, and the Transportation Secretary in Baltimore has described the collapse of this bridge and the events leading up to it as catastrophic. We've had within the last few minutes a statement from the White House. The President has been briefed on the collapse of the Francis Scott Key Bridge in Baltimore and the ongoing search and rescue efforts. He will continue to receive updates from his team throughout the day. That's the word from the White House. At the scene in Baltimore, it is now 7 hours since this incident occurred, and the authorities are still trying to determine precisely how many people may have been swept into the water. And that's very difficult to resolve, because even though this took place at 1:30 in the morning, there will have been cars and trucks crossing that absolutely pivotal structure at that time of night. And we also understand that there were some transportation workers who were engaged in some roadway repairs who were on the bridge at the time, and it's feared that they may have been swept into the water. With every passing hour, of course, there will be challenges to keeping hopes alive for those people swept into the river, because the water will have been very chilly at that early hour of the morning, and the longer these search and rescue efforts continue, the more hopes of finding survivors will, I think, fade. As for the ship itself, we're told that there were no casualties on board the Dali, which is a Singapore-flagged vessel. It was just beginning its 22-day journey to Sri Lanka. The vessel is owned and operated by a Singapore-based company by the name of Synergy Marine Group. Its owners and managers are largely Indian nationals, and in a statement that has just been released, the company confirms that all 22 crew aboard the vessel are Indians. Now, there are obviously massive questions relating to how this incident occurred. There were 2 pilots on board the vessel, as is normal when ships of this size are leaving the port of Baltimore and navigating their way through the waters and into the open ocean. There will be very big questions, I think, for those presumably locally based pilots who were on board the vessel and under normal circumstances would absolutely have steered it through the bridge without obviously slamming into that central support structure.
Certainly, Simon. Now, the Baltimore fire chief in that press conference, a part of which we played out, has said that there's no indication so far of this being a terror incident. But are we any closer to finding out what really happened? There's speculation around power failure and all that.
Look, I think this investigation is going to take quite a while, and it will be led by federal authorities, including the National Transportation Safety Board here in Washington, D.C., that I'm sure is in the throes of dispatching a first response team to Baltimore. There is no indication that this was in any sense intentional, according to the authorities in Baltimore, although precisely what led that ship to slam into that central support structure, bringing the bridge down, the central piece of the bridge down, in just a matter of seconds. The Baltimore Transportation Secretary said that the scene looked like it was out of a disaster movie, and indeed, for those people caught up in this tragedy, it was a disaster movie brought to real life. The investigation's going to take a very long while, I think. We may learn a little bit more over the course of the next few hours as interviews are conducted with the captain and crew on board the Dali, and also, of course, with any surviving witnesses to the event. There's also lots of video footage because, remember, as a result of security concerns about, among other things, terrorism, that bridge is dotted with cameras, as are all the major bridges and roadways throughout this part of the United States. So there'll be plenty of different angles of video showing exactly what happened, and that may provide some information about how this took place.
Well, certainly one needs to get to bottom of it, because what it brings up is images of 9/11 as well, and that's something that many people would not like to be reminded of. Now, the port of Baltimore near the bridge is the largest in the U.S. for specialized cargo as well. I believe a lot of cars are exported out of there. What sort of an impact will this incident have on U.S. and global shipping?
Well, I think pretty substantial. I mean, we're told there's going to be a ripple effect. There are at least 40 vessels reportedly on their way to the port of Baltimore right now. And clearly, with the site, the scene of search and rescue efforts, they are going to have to either wait in order to approach the port, or they're going to have to find other routes into the port of Baltimore, because clearly that roadway is now, and the bridge is going to be the scene of a potentially criminal investigation in the course of the next several hours and days. So the authorities are warning of a possible ripple effect as we all learn the extent to which the port is going to be problematic for shipping to arrive at or depart from. It is a massive port, hugely important to the United States economy, and of course in and of itself a key part of America's supply chain. So I think there will be anxieties about that, but of course there are other ports up and down the eastern seaboard of the United States that may be required to accept additional traffic as a result result of this disruption. Economically, this is going to cause some big questions for this region in the United States, because that bridge and the interstate highway that it accommodated is an absolutely pivotal roadway in this region, and its disappearance is going to have seismic impacts economically for Washington, D.C., Maryland, Pennsylvania, and nearby states.
But let's hope that this disruption is managed and we get to the bottom of what really happened, because it is extremely bizarre the way these images were flashed across initially, and one just couldn't believe one's eyes. Thanks a lot for joining us for the moment, Simon Marks. Now, it's more waiting for Julian Assange for now, with London's High Court giving the United States 3 weeks to provide a series of assurances. If those assurances are not forthcoming, then the leave to appeal to Assange and his legal team will be granted. US prosecutors are seeking to put Assange on trial on 18 counts related to WikiLeaks' high-profile release of vast troves of confidential US military records and diplomatic cables. Assange's legal battles in Britain began in 2010, and he subsequently spent 7 years holed up in Ecuador's embassy in London before he was dragged out and jailed in 2019 for breaching bail conditions. And DD India's Surya Smith has more on this from London.
2 High Court judges making this decision have already spent weeks deliberating, but it seems there was more information, or at least more certainty, they needed from the United States in order to decide whether an extradition can go ahead or not. They are looking specifically for 3 pieces of information, 3 assurances from the United States. First of all, that if Julian Assange is extradited, then he can experience a fair hearing under the First Amendment to the US Constitution, the one that guarantees freedom of speech. Secondly, that his nationality, his Australian nationality, will not prejudice that hearing. And thirdly, that he will not be sentenced to death if convicted. Now, the US has 3 weeks to respond to that. If they don't respond, then the default position is Julian Assange will be entitled to that full hearing. A process that's already gone on for more than a decade could continue, and that's why this is being considered a partial victory for Julian Assange, because he is not being deported outright. But if the High Court here in London believes that those 3 assurances are satisfactorily made by the United States, then it would be a case of him being extradited from the UK, though what still remains is that option to appeal to the European Court of Human Rights outside the UK justice system, which is most likely his final attempt to stop extradition if UK courts decide that he can be sent to the United States.
Now, after the United Nations Security Council passed a resolution calling for an immediate ceasefire between Israel and Hamas, Qatar Foreign Ministry spokesperson has said that this has not had an immediate impact on talks in Doha. Talks mediated by Egypt and Qatar are progressing, and officials from Israel's spy agency Mossad continue to remain in Qatar for further discussions. Israel has accused Hamas of making unrealistic demands and claimed that Hamas terrorists are uninterested in a deal. Meanwhile, Israel has opted to withdraw its delegation to Washington following the United States' decision not to veto the UNSC resolution passed on Monday. DD India's Sarah Coates sent us this report from Tel Aviv.
Qatar's Foreign Ministry spokesperson says that indirect negotiations talks are continuing in Doha between Israel and Hamas. This is despite Israel pulling its negotiating team from the Qatari capital after Hamas seemingly rejected an offer saying it wants a comprehensive ceasefire. Well, the Israeli Prime Minister's office responding on X saying that this is proof that Hamas isn't interested in continuing talks and a sad testament to the damage caused by the United Nations Security Council resolution, adding that Israel will not cave to Hamas's delusional demands and will press on with this military campaign in Gaza, not only to release these hostages, but to dismantle Hamas. And there is really a lot of concern over this southernmost city of Rafah. This is where some 1.3 million internally displaced Palestinians are sheltering. And this is why Israel's Defense Minister Yoav Gallant is right now in the United States meeting with his US counterpart Lloyd Austin. They are discussing Israel's potential military operation in Rafah. And this is certainly something that is extremely concerning to the United States. We've heard from President Biden and the Vice President Kamala Harris both saying it would be a mistake, it would be a red line. Harris coming out just a couple of days ago to say that she has studied these maps and there is simply no place for these some 1.3 million people to go. Now, this is why this Israeli delegation was supposed to be heading to Washington to discuss alternatives to this operation in Rafah. But as we do know, that was swiftly pulled on the back of this UNSC resolution passing, with Israel very, very angry that there was no veto by the United States, that it actually let it pass, really deepening the rift between Israel and Washington. Sarah Coates reporting from Tel Aviv for DD India.
And still to come in this edition of DD India Live, Donald Trump's lawyers failed to delay the start of his trial in the Stormy Daniels hush money case. And 6 people are killed in a terrorist attack in Pakistan's second largest naval airbase in Balochistan, while 5 Chinese nationals are killed in an explosion in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. And a potentially deadly strep throat infection is rising in Japan.
Voice of a rising aspirational world. Stories of challenges, struggles and accomplishment. A world battling conflict, hunger and poverty. Embracing growth, development, science and technology. A voice of progress, a voice of unity. Watch Voice of the Global South with me, Akshay Dongre, only on DD India.
You're watching DD India Live. I'm Gautam Roy. Former US President Donald Trump's criminal hush money case is set to go to trial on the 15th of next month. The former president's legal team wanted the trial dropped or subsequently delayed after federal investigators released a batch of documents they deemed relevant to the case. But in a win for Donald Trump, his bond in a separate civil case has been substantially reduced. William Denslow reports from New York.
Donald Trump and his legal team headed to court here in Lower Manhattan on Monday, hoping that the criminal case he faces, tied to allegations that he paid hush money to a porn star in the lead up to the 2016 presidential election, would be dismissed, or at least the trial would be substantially delayed. March 25th was originally the date planned for that trial to begin. However, recently, a little earlier this month, the judge delayed it by 30 days. This came after a huge tranche of court documents were released by federal investigators. Now, Donald Trump's team said that the handling and the late release of these documents were grounds for the case to be dismissed. The judge didn't see things that way. Instead, he decided to keep his ruling as it was after his initial revision, which means that April 15th will be the first of Donald Trump's 4 criminal cases that he faces to go to trial. Donald Trump has denied wrongdoing in those counts, pleading not guilty to all 34 felonies that he faces in that regard. However, he was granted somewhat of a win on Monday. Recently, Donald Trump was ordered to pay around $450 million after he was found liable for fraud. However, an appeals court here in New York has ruled that instead of having to pay that amount, he now has to pay just a $175 million bond while his appeal continues. Donald Trump has 10 days to make that payment. He says he will do. He has railed against these cases here in New York, as well as the various other civil and criminal cases that he faces. He says that it's election interference, and he says it's essentially a product of the justice system becoming weaponized to hurt his re-election campaign. William Denslow in New York reporting for DD India.
And closer to home in Pakistan, a suicide bomber rammed a vehicle into a convoy of Chinese engineers working on a dam project in northwest Pakistan on Tuesday. which led to the death of 6 people in the incident. This is the third major attack on Chinese interests in Pakistan in a week after attack on an airbase and a strategic port in the southwestern province of Balochistan. The engineers were on their way from Islamabad to their camp at the dam construction site in Dasu in the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province. So far, no one has claimed responsibility for Tuesday's attack. Japanese health authorities are cautioning about rising numbers of strep throat cases that have the potential to turn deadly, although an expert said the surge is unlikely to result in a pandemic. Cases of streptococcal toxic shock syndrome, which has a fatality rate of up to 30%, are running about 3 times higher than last year in Tokyo. Experts believe disease is not a respiratory illness like pneumonia or COVID-19, so it's unlikely to lead to a pandemic-like situation. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi had a telephonic conversation with Belgium's Prime Minister Alexander De Croo. The PM congratulated PM De Croo on a recent successful hosting of the first nuclear energy summit in Brussels. Both leaders reviewed the excellent relations between India and Belgium. They discussed ways to further strengthen the bilateral partnership in diverse sectors including trade, investment, clean technologies, semiconductors, pharmaceuticals, green hydrogen, IT, defence, ports, among others. These 2 leaders affirmed commitment to further bolster the India-EU strategic partnership under the ongoing Belgian presidency of the Council of the European Union. And India's External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar on Tuesday reiterated its support to Philippines in upholding its national sovereignty. Dr. Jaishankar was interacting with the media in Manila with his Filipino counterpart Enrique Manalo.
I take this opportunity to firmly reiterate India's support to the Philippines for upholding its national sovereignty. As the world changes, it is essential that countries like India and the Philippines cooperate more closely to shape the emerging order.
And Dr. Jaishankar also called on Philippines President Bongbong Marcos in Manila on Tuesday. The minister conveyed the greetings of President Draupadi Murmu and Prime Minister Narendra Modi to President Marcos. In a social media post, Dr. Jaishankar said that he valued his warm sentiments towards India-Philippines partnership. The External Affairs Minister also noted that Marcos' guidance for taking the ties to new areas will strengthen collaboration between the 2 democracies. Prime Minister Narendra Modi called Rekha Patra, the BJP candidate from Bashirhat and one of the Sandesh Khali victims. He spoke to her about her campaign preparations, support among people for BJP and more. The PM called her Shakti Swarupa. Rekha Patra detailed the ordeals faced by women in Sandesh Khali. Let's now get you the latest on what's happening in India in the run-up to the world's largest democratic election. The BJP has released its 6th list of candidates for the Lok Sabha elections. The list contains the names of 3 candidates. The list has 2 candidates from Rajasthan and 1 from Manipur. The BJP has put up Indu Devi Jatav from Karoli Dholpur Lok Sabha seat in Rajasthan and Kanhaiya Lal Meena from Dausa. The BJP has also put up Thonajam Basant Kumar Singh from the Inner Manipur Lok Sabha seat. Let's also tell you that the BJP has till now released 6 lists of candidates, and till now names of 402 candidates have been announced. New faces prominently are in the BJP's list of candidates. Several heavyweights are also in the fray once again. And the BJP on Tuesday announced that the party would contest the upcoming Lok Sabha elections alone in Punjab and will not form an alliance with the Shiromani Akali Dal. The Bharatiya Janata Party's Punjab chief Sunil Jakhar announced the decision, saying that the decision was taken on the basis of the opinion of the people and party workers in Punjab. Now, as campaigning for the 2024 general elections gains momentum, more and more controversies are getting generated. Congress's senior leader, Supriya Shinaith, made derogatory comments against the actor and now BJP candidate from Himachal Pradesh's Mandi seat, Kangana Ranaut, which have led to a massive political backlash against the Congress. The BJP has hit out at the Congress, saying that Shinaith's Instagram post speaks to the mindset of the Congress and what it thinks about women. Several BJP leaders have condemned the derogatory comments made about Kangana Ranaut. Meanwhile, Kangana Ranaut herself has arrived in New Delhi and will be meeting BJP President JP Nadda later this evening. The Janata Dal Secular Party has announced candidates for the Mandya, Hassan and Kolar Lok Sabha seats after the party's core committee meeting, which was held earlier today. Former Chief Minister H.D. Kumaraswamy will be the party's candidate from Mandya. The JDS is fielding MP and former Minister H.D. Revanna's son, Prajwal Revanna, in the fray as well. Revanna will be contesting from the Hassan seat. As part of seat sharing with the BJP, the JDS will be in the fray in 3 seats, while the BJP will be fighting in 25 seats in Karnataka. Let's now take a look at some of the other updates making the news today. The Election Commission of India has issued advisory to chief electoral officers of all the states and union territories in view of the upcoming heat wave. The Commission shared a copy of do's and don'ts to minimize the impact of heat wave. The Commission asked electoral officers to ensure minimum basic facilities including drinking water and shade at polling stations. Indian politician K. Kavita has been sent to jail till the 9th of April after her custody with the Enforcement Directorate ended on Tuesday. Her plea of interim bail will be taken up on the 1st of next month. And that's all we have in this edition of DD India Live, but let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. You can connect with us on Facebook, X as well as Instagram. We'll be back with more news and updates as a break here on DD India. I'm Gautam Roy from all of us here in Delhi. Thanks for watching DD India Live.